Welcome to Tactical Tangents.
Hey guys, it's Mike with Tactical Tangents, and I'm here with a short little bonus rant brought to you by Dry Fire Mag. Dry Fire Mag solves the common annoying problem of having to rack the slide every time you press the trigger in dry fire training. One of the bad habits it took me a long time to break was proper trigger follow-through in dry fire. The Dry Fire Mag will help you eliminate that problem almost immediately. Go buy a Dry Fire Mag and double your training reps in just a few minutes a day at dryfiremag.com. So my TED Talk today is a little dark, but I think it's important. In a lot of training settings, I've heard instructors, and firearms instructors in particular, talk about the use of lethal force. And what kind of bothers me is when we as instructors talk about lethal force in a way that kind of skirts the issue. And what I mean is when in talking about firearms manipulations or being in a gunfight, they'll say things like, so you do this or that or the other thing, and then go to work, and then do what you got to do. Well, my issue with this is, as firearms instructors especially, it's important that we get our students thinking critically about the value of human life. Some might say the sanctity of human life, and that's fine too. But it's not just because we should take seriously the idea of killing another human, which of course we should, but it's also a basic combat preparation or mental preparation thing. So in a lot of our minds, we have this fantasy, right? The evil doer who's going to threaten me or my family, and on some level, it becomes an easy choice, right? Oh, he's going to threaten me or my family. Like, obviously, it's going to be him before me any day of the week. But I think a lot of people also sell it short. They think that it's going to be this very linear path to extreme violence with this very clear climax where this guy's about to kill me and blam, 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 I'm going to win. There's a couple problems with that, right? The first one is, for a lot of people, the aftermath is going to be a lot more difficult than they or we might think. They're going to be isolated. They're going to be treated like a suspect. They're going to have to answer difficult questions. They are often going to question themselves, and they have to live with what happened, right or wrong. So that's something to think about. They will probably remember details of the event that will leave a mark for the rest of their lives. But the second reason is, a lot of times it's not that clear of a choice. It's this thing where you kind of find yourself on the fence, like, should I shoot this guy? And this is something that has come up in a lot of conversations with police officers. If I took a room full of cops and I asked that room how many of them have been in a shooting, you might see a couple hands. Depending on the room that you're in, you might not see that many people. But if you were to ask how many of them have almost been in a shooting, most will have a story, if not several stories. And the thing is, those decisions matter too, because on some level, they're betting their safety on their choice to not shoot. So in this very clear-cut situation where the choices are kill or be killed, that's pretty easy. But there's a lot of that gray area, right? Those fringe cases that you have to have a little bit of a conversation with yourself about, should I shoot this guy or no? And that can be tough. I've been there. That's very hard. We did an episode a while back with Dr. Dr Blumberg. He's a police psychologist and also a professor that studies this kind of stuff and does a lot of research. And he wrote a book called The Power Manual for Cops. It's great. A while back, we talked with him about the moral risks of policing. And one of the things that came up in that discussion was related to this critical incident that I was involved with a few years back, where this guy was pointing a gun at us and trying to do a police-assisted suicide or suicide by cop. And in my mind, it took a long time for the officers who were on lethal cover to shoot the guy. In this particular scenario, I had my canine out of the car. We were kind of hunkered down behind cover. And so my hands were a little bit full. I wasn't in a great spot to shoot. And we had those dedicated lethal cover officers, right? But then I find this guy like pointing a gun at me. And I remember thinking to myself, why isn't anyone shooting this dude? Like, someone shoot him. And afterwards, we had our, incident debrief with our psychologist. Everyone who was intimately involved in that incident had to go talk with the doc. And one of the things that I learned about and kind of wrapping my head around, like, why did it take so long for these guys to shoot him, is that moral risk, the moral risks that come with this job, and the potential to be morally injured, right? Which is a little bit different than sort of PTSD, and it's a little bit different than physical injury. So it's something that you can, if you want to go check out that episode with Dr. Blumberg, we talk a lot about that. But the idea ultimately is that everyone's threshold is a little bit different, right? And in this case, the guy was clearly just trying to get officers to shoot him. He was trying to do suicide by cop, police-assisted suicide, whatever you want to call it. And from a moral standpoint, a lot of officers who have dealt with that sort of situation, they don't want to kill the person, right? Because it's kind of a forced self-defense situation. They didn't want to have to shoot him. But where I struggle with this is, as a police officer, you've got to remember that it's not just your own life that you are gambling with, right? It's not just your life on the line. It's other cops and the public and people who depend on you to be decisive when it comes time to perform. And that's kind of where I'm going with this. As firearms instructors or police trainers, we have to think about helping our students define those moral thresholds. And we got to do that before someone is pointing a gun at them or somebody else. They've got to have that figured out ahead of time. Imagine, the guy with a knife and he's, 50, 60 feet away from you and he starts walking towards you and he's saying, kill me, kill me, kill me. And you're telling the guy like, dude, I don't want to do that, but you need to stop. How far are you going to let them walk up on you before you decide to shoot them? And I have seen police officers in body-worn camera footage and stuff like that get sort of paralyzed by that because they don't want to shoot the guy, but at some point you have to. So you have to have that threshold figured out before the guy's advancing on you with a knife or something, right? And at the end of the day, you can't let your students allow that person to get too close. These lessons are a lot more important than sight alignment and trigger control. They have to draw that line in the sand, and from a moral standpoint, figure out at which point they're going to be capable and willing of pulling the trigger if that's what's necessary. So early in the academy, for every recruit class that comes through my agency, there's a class that I teach, and I show them the video of Deputy Kyle Dinkheller getting murdered on the side of the road. And it's a pretty common video. A lot of people have seen it. And it shows this, I think it happened in like 1998, somewhere around there. And it shows the deputy telling this guy who was obviously struggling with some mental health stuff. And he goes back to his truck after trying to fight with the officer, and he's loading a rifle. And the officer starts telling, or the deputy starts telling the guy, put the gun down, put the gun down, put the gun down for something like 23 seconds. Plenty of time to have acted in his own self-defense. And he ultimately did act after that 20-something seconds or so, but it was too late. The guy had the gun loaded and essentially executed the deputy. It's a pretty hard video to watch, but I think it's an important lesson. In every class, I show this video to the recruits and I ask them what they would have done differently. And I say, what do you think the right answer is here? And inevitably, several of them will use sort of vague language about that, well, I would do what I have to do. And it's like, no, man, you need to be super clear about what we're talking about. Let's not dodge this issue. You need to kill him. You have to kill him. Now, I understand that in law enforcement, we say things like, well, we don't shoot to kill. We shoot to stop the threat. Okay, sure, that's true. In law enforcement, if you have to shoot a person because they were a lethal threat and they're not dead and they're no longer a lethal threat, then you would stop shooting, right? Of course, yes, that is all true. But the point that I am making is that we are talking about lethal force. We have to assume that shooting a person is going to result in their death, and we have to come to terms with that moral threshold because it is a serious choice. And it's a necessary decision. This gets even more important when we talk about things like active killer response, where someone decides to go shoot up a school or they go to their workplace or something. Indecisiveness in a scenario like that will cost innocent lives. So when we teach stuff like that, we have to be very clear with our students. You need to close with and kill that person. If they're taking innocent lives, you close with and kill them. And I think that language is important for people to reconcile in their heads before they are the ones entrusted to respond to something like that. And as instructors, we are selling ourselves and our students short if we dodge that language about what exactly we mean when we say to shoot somebody. Now, my last thought on this is in terms of the sanctity of human life. We talked about this in the beginning. I think that this is important because I also hear a lot of guys and gals talk about that tactical fantasy. We did a whole episode on this where, people will say things like, oh, I would just shoot him. And, oh, okay. Obviously you would just shoot him and that would just be super easy. And I've been to a lot of calls where, some homeowner on a call like catches someone on their property and they come out and they start like firing warning shots in the air. And we're like, okay, easy. You can't just do that. That's not how this works. So when we are teaching people about guns and how to shoot and about the legal stuff, perhaps surrounding the use of a gun in something like self-defense, we also need them to be thinking about how serious guns and shooting people are. And perhaps in that case, we should use clearer language. So don't say stuff like go to work or do what you got to do. Say what you really mean. You might have to shoot that person. You might have to kill that person. That person might be shitting out of a bag for the rest of their life or unable to walk again if they survive. Or you're going to kill them, and although they might have made bad choices in life, they might have a mom or a dad who's been trying to help them get back on track, or a brother or a sister who has always been there for them, or a kid who hopes that someday his mom or his dad might come back. Now, that doesn't mean you don't shoot that person if they need to be shot, but it's something that you should not be taking lightly. And if you are an instructor, your students should not be taking that lightly. So I think we need to really tell it like it is and make sure that our students are taking that away from our training. And hopefully that helps them get good and get better, not only with their proficiency, but also with their tactics and their decision making. So that's all I got. Make sure you go check out our regular episodes on the 1st and the 15th of every month. Go check out Dry Fire Mag and get you some good talk.